Ever wonder how those massive medieval castles made of cold stone and towering walls could hold off entire armies for months or even years? It's mind-blowing to think about how these fortresses, built centuries ago, managed to resist the relentless onslaught of siege weapons, armies, and desperate invaders. These castles weren't just giant homes. They were finely tuned machines of war, crafted with genius-level engineering and brutal strategy. And here's a teaser. Stick around until the end, because we're going to reveal the surprising secret weapon that could turn the tide of battle and save an entire castle from destruction. The perfect location, nature's first defense. The battle began long before attackers even saw the walls. The smartest medieval castle builders knew the first defense was nature itself. They picked locations that turned the terrain into a deadly trap for invaders. Building on high ground was a classic strategy. Perched on hills, cliffs, or rocky crags, castles forced attackers to climb exhausting slopes in full armor, often under a barrage of arrows and rocks. Imagine trudging uphill, weighed down by heavy gear, while defenders launched deadly missiles from above. Sheer exhaustion often took down many before the battle even started. Some castles took advantage of natural water barriers. Castles like Bodiam in England sat on islands surrounded by wide moats filled with water, making it nearly impossible for siege towers or battering rams to reach the walls. Others used steep drops or marshlands on multiple sides, limiting where enemies could approach. Attack routes were carefully designed to be narrow, twisting, and exposed, perfect for defenders to pick off attackers one by one. Sometimes there was only a single path up, turning the assault into a dangerous funnel where attackers were easy targets. Weather also played a role. Rain could turn approach roads into muddy quagmires, stopping siege equipment dead in its tracks. Cold winter winds made exposure outside the walls brutal for attackers. The terrain wasn't just physical, it was psychological. After days of marching, many invading forces lost their nerve when faced with seemingly impossible natural obstacles guarding these stone giants. The impenetrable walls, engineering a fortress. Once attackers overcame nature's hurdles, they faced the castle's most iconic feature, the walls. But these weren't just any walls. They were colossal, cunningly built fortifications designed to absorb punishment and keep enemies out. Many castle walls were up to 20 feet thick, thicker than a school bus is long. This immense bulk wasn't just for show. It helped absorb the shock from battering rams, catapults, and other siege engines. The walls were built with a sandwich technique, two solid stone faces filled in the middle with rubble and mortar. This core was surprisingly flexible, able to withstand repeated blows without cracking. Walls often had a sloped base called a talus, which deflected attacks upward, making it harder for siege ladders to rest securely and lessening the impact of battering rams. This slope also forced attackers into awkward angles during assaults. Some castles boasted concentric walls. Think of it as a fortress within a fortress. An outer wall surrounded a taller inner wall. If attackers managed to breach the outer wall, they'd be trapped in a deadly killing zone between the walls, exposed to arrows and rocks raining down from multiple angles. Ingenious traps extended underground too. Builders placed loose stones or gravel in strategic spots where sappers might try to tunnel under the walls. When disturbed, these materials would shift and create noise, alerting guards to enemy digging efforts. The gatehouse, a death trap in disguise. The castle gate was often the most vulnerable spot, but medieval engineers transformed this potential weakness into a nightmare for attackers. The gatehouse was not just a simple door. It was a fortress in miniature, loaded with layers of defenses designed to trap and slaughter anyone who dared enter. First came the drawbridge, which could be raised quickly to prevent crossing the moat. Behind it were heavy, iron-reinforced wooden doors. Tough, but still just the beginning. The real danger lurked beyond the doors, the portcullis. This was a massive iron or wooden grill that could be dropped suddenly to trap attackers in a narrow corridor. Some castles had two portcullises spaced apart, creating a deadly kill zone between them. Above, murder holes dotted the ceiling. Through these narrow openings, defenders poured boiling water, hot sand, rocks, or even scalding oil onto trapped enemies below. The terrifying heat and crushing weight of falling stones made the gatehouse a deadly trap no attacker wanted to face. Arrow loops, narrow vertical slits in the walls, allowed archers to fire with precision while staying protected. The entire gatehouse often projected outward from the main walls, creating a three-sided crossfire zone where defenders could attack from multiple directions. Some castles added psychological twists too. Sharp turns in the approach stopped battering rams from gaining momentum, and false gates lured attackers into traps deeper inside the fortress. Essentially, they built medieval mazes designed to confuse and kill. But what if all these defenses weren't enough? What if attackers managed to get over the walls or through the gates? How did castle defenders maintain their advantage even then? Keep watching. The answer might shock you. Height advantage, towers and battle platforms. Height was the ultimate weapon in castle defense. Towers rose up to 100 feet or more, giving defenders a commanding view and deadly reach. At the top of walls and towers, crenellations, the classic notched battlements, provided cover. Defenders could shoot arrows or drop objects through the gaps while staying shielded behind the raised sections. Walkways called wall walks ran along the tops of walls, wide enough for two armored soldiers to pass side by side. This allowed defenders to move quickly and coordinate attacks from multiple positions. Longbowmen could shoot accurate arrows from hundreds of yards away, while crossbowmen specialized in armor-piercing bolts at closer range. Some towers featured overlapping arrow slits designed to cover every angle, so attackers faced arrows from all sides. Heavier weapons like ballistae and springalds launched giant darts or bolts powerful enough to pierce armor or pin multiple enemies together. Defenders also used simple but devastating tactics like dropping massive rocks. A 20-pound rock dropped from 40 feet hit with the force of a horse's kick, enough to crush helmets, shields, and skulls. Other terrifying defenses included machicolations, stone projections with floor openings that allowed defenders to pour hot sand or boiling water directly onto attackers below. Moats and ditches, the water barriers. Between attackers and the walls often lay one last obstacle, the moat or ditch. These trenches were more than just water-filled pits. They were strategic barriers designed to stop, slow, and frustrate invaders. Most moats were 10 to 30 feet wide and 5 to 10 feet deep, sometimes filled with water, sometimes dry but filled with spikes, sharp stakes, or even dangerous animals. Water moats made tunneling impossible, as any underground tunnels would flood instantly. Crossing a moat was perilous. Attackers had to build bridges under fire or attempt risky boat crossings, all while defenders rained arrows and projectiles down on them. Some moats were designed as psychological weapons. Castles sometimes filled moats with sewage, rotting garbage, and filth to repel attackers with unbearable smells and disease risks. Towers as command centers and lookouts. Towers weren't just for offense, they were early warning systems too. Lookouts stationed high above could spot enemy movements days before they arrived, sending signals by fire, smoke, or flags to alert the castle. Early towers were square, but these had blind spots that attackers exploited. By the 12th century, round or D-shaped towers became standard, eliminating blind spots and making them harder to break with battering rams. Towers were spaced carefully, roughly 100 to 200 feet apart, to create overlapping fields of fire. Attackers were caught in crossfires from multiple angles. Imagine trying to dodge arrows from several directions while climbing a ladder. It was like a medieval nightmare video game. Inside, spiral staircases wound clockwise, favoring defenders descending while hindering right-handed attackers climbing up. These small details made a huge difference in close-quarters combat. Siege survival, food, water, and sanitation. Defense wasn't just about keeping enemies out, it was also about surviving long sieges inside. Castles were essentially self-contained communities during attacks. Massive underground storerooms called undercrofts held months' worth of food: dried grains, salted meats, smoked fish, and hard cheeses. Some castles prepared supplies to last a full year. Water was even more critical. Many castles had wells dug deep into bedrock under their courtyards, some reaching over 100 feet down. Others collected rainwater in huge cisterns. Without water, defenders would have been defeated far sooner than any invading army. Life inside was cramped and uncomfortable. Noble families might share rooms with dozens of peasants, and privacy disappeared. Sanitation was a constant problem. Latrines emptied through chutes in the outer walls, which could be vulnerable to enemy attacks or fire starting. To fight disease and boost morale, defenders brewed beer and wine, which were safer to drink than questionable water. Secret passageways, escape, and surprise attacks. Not all castle doors were obvious. Many castles had hidden tunnels and secret passageways that allowed defenders to slip out unnoticed, launch surprise raids, or evacuate if the fortress fell. These secret routes often wound through woods or cliffs far from the castle. Some had sharp turns or traps to stop enemies who tried to follow. Records show defenders using these sally ports to launch nighttime attacks, sabotage siege engines, and disrupt enemy supply lines. The original medieval guerrilla warfare. False tunnels or dead ends also lured invaders into deadly traps, sometimes flooding chambers or hiding spike pits. In fact, the downfall of some castles came through such secret tunnels, sometimes forgotten or poorly guarded. And surprisingly, one famous fortress fell because of a neglected toilet chute. Yes, a latrine passage used by defenders that became an unintended route for attackers. The details are shocking and will blow your mind. Counter-siege strategies. Fighting back. Castles didn't just sit and wait for invaders to batter their walls. Defenders actively fought back using clever tactics. Boulders were dropped on battering rams, smashing them to splinters. Stones and arrows targeted enemy engineers trying to repair siege equipment. Oil was rare and expensive, so defenders often used boiling water or sand instead. Scalding hot, these materials caused devastating burns and blinded attackers. Defenders played a deadly chess game, predicting attacker moves and setting traps days or weeks in advance. Sieges could last months or years, but castle defenders often found a way to outlast their enemies through ingenuity and sheer stubbornness. So, remember that castle that fell through a forgotten toilet chute? It wasn't just a funny accident. It was a catastrophic failure in defending the fortress. The man who discovered it? A drunk soldier at a tavern who overheard plans to sneak in through that hidden passage. One careless slip, one secret tunnel exploited, and an entire fortress crumbled. Castles weren't just piles of stone. They were centuries ahead of their time, marvels of engineering, strategy, and brutal survival. They taught armies that even the strongest attackers had to think twice before challenging stone and steel. If you thought castles were just old buildings, think again. These were war machines built to outsmart and outlast entire armies, centuries before tanks or airplanes. If you want to dive deeper into how medieval engineers outsmarted their enemies and built these incredible fortresses, hit like and subscribe. Tell us in the comments, which castle would you want to defend or attack? And remember, sometimes the smallest hidden passage can change the entire course of history.